The heat hit Evan Calder the moment he stepped into the market. Not the clean burn of open desert, this heat was alive. It crawled across his skin, thick with the stink of cooking oil, rusted metal, and unwashed bodies packed too tightly together. Above it all, the sky hung motionless, a dull copper gray that never changed. Not since the wars, not since the collapse. This place used to be a settlement. Now it was a scar. Tattered tarps stretched between skeletal buildings. Vendors shouted over one another, selling scrap that barely worked, food that might kill you slower than hunger, and weapons that might not survive their first swing. Evan moved through the crowd with his shoulders hunched, one hand on the credits in his pocket, the other resting near the broken knife on his hip. Humans were rare here. Conversations dipped as he passed. Three-eyed traders, horned scavengers, slit-pupil clanfolk watching him with cautious hunger. Evan ignored them. He was here for one thing, a blade. Simple, reliable. Something that wouldn't snap when he needed it most. A hand shot out and grabbed his sleeve. No steel today, traveler. Evan turned sharply. The merchant was old, his face cracked like dried leather, eyes sharp behind layers of dust. His stall was nearly empty. Corroded tools, wire coils, junk. "I'm looking for something better," Evan said, pulling back. The grip tightened. "I know," the merchant whispered, smiling with too many missing teeth. "Much better." Before Evan could react, the merchant yanked a tarp aside. Inside the crate was a girl. Not human. Blue skin, darker than the night sky, stretched over coiled muscle even as she lay curled unnaturally small. Even like this, she was massive, 7 feet tall at least. Strength radiated from her in a way that made Evan's instincts scream. But it was the cage that made his stomach drop. A heavy iron framework encased her entire head, welded into a thick collar locked around her neck. Bars crossed her face in a tight grid. Embedded rings along the collar pulsed faint orange with ancient clan symbols. Her golden eyes snapped to him. Fear, sharp, intelligent. "Alive. Buy her," the merchant murmured. "Stronger than 10 soldiers. Just don't remove the cage." The girl spoke, her voice small and broken. "Don't come closer." Evan's chest tightened. For the first time, he understood. This wasn't merchandise. This was a person. And someone had decided she deserved to be owned. Evan should have walked away. Instead, he knelt beside the crate, and that single choice sealed both their fates. By the 4th day, Scott realized the galaxy had lied to him. Not maliciously, not intentionally, but thoroughly. Interstellar manuals claimed cultural misunderstandings were rare but manageable, that most sentient species shared, baseline concepts of privacy, personal space, and consent. Liana shattered that assumption with polite efficiency. She moved through his apartment like it was an extension of herself. Not invasive, intimate. She didn't knock, didn't announce herself. When Scott changed clothes, she turned away only after he cleared his throat loudly. When he cooked, she hovered close, studying every motion as if he were performing ritual magic. "You can..." "Step back," Scott said one evening, gripping a knife a little tighter than necessary. Liana tilted her head. "Am I obstructing your task?" "No, you're just too close." Her crest dimmed slightly. "Distance implies distrust." Scott sighed. "On Earth, distance implies comfort." That stopped her. She retreated 2 steps, movements precise, almost wounded. The air shifted. Scott felt it then. The invisible tension of 2 species, guessing blindly at each other's rules. Later that night, he accessed her cultural file. The translation made his stomach drop. In Liana's species, proximity was safety. Sleeping alone was punishment. Touch was reassurance. Distance meant abandonment. The weight on his chest that first morning hadn't been desire. It had been instinct. Scott leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "We really are terrifying to the rest of the universe," he muttered. Humans built walls, doors, locks. We celebrated solitude, and now one alien woman was trying to survive inside that chaos. Scott made a choice. The first human choice of many. He deleted half the agency guidelines and began writing his own. Scott didn't realize it yet, but changing the rules. For one alien would force humanity to explain itself to the stars. The first strike came fast, too fast. Evan barely blocked it with a rusted length of rebar before pain exploded through his ribs. Warriors surrounded them, blades flashing, movements precise and merciless. "Leave!" The girl screamed from the crate. Evan didn't. A blade slashed his arm. Blood sprayed across the sand, the crate, the cage. The iron rings flared red. The cage woke up. Symbols rotated, locking into a new pattern as heat rolled outward in waves. Warriors staggered back, faces pale. He activated the oath, one whispered. No, the leader said. That's impossible. The girl trembled violently. Don't touch it. It binds us, it kills us both. Evan grabbed the cage anyway. Pain unlike anything he'd known tore through his hands as metal burned flesh to bone. Smoke rose. His vision blurred. Let go, she cried. Please. Evan roared and pulled. The cage shattered. Not bent, not broken. Shattered. Iron fragments fell into the sand, glowing briefly before dying. The collar split. The chains dissolved into rust. Silence. The girl touched her face, sobbing as she realized she was free. The warriors froze. You broke forbidden law, the leader said hollowly. Your lives are bound now. Before Evan could answer, war horns echoed across the wasteland. Dozens, hundreds. The elders were coming. Evan collapsed, barely conscious, and the freed girl caught him effortlessly, cradling him like he weighed nothing. You freed me, she whispered. And doomed yourself. Evan smiled weakly. Worth it. The cage was gone. The law was broken. And the entire clan was about to decide whether Mercy deserved death. Evan stared at the girl behind the bars, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were telling him. She tracked every movement he made like a cornered animal, muscles tensing beneath bruised blue skin. Chains rattled softly as she shifted, pulling back as far as the crate allowed. This is wrong, Evan said. This is survival, the merchant replied flatly. She's merchandise. The girl's voice trembled. If your scent touches me, my clan will know. It marks us. The merchant kicked the crate. Quiet. Evan's hand went to his knife without thinking. Don't touch her again. The merchant raised both hands, smiling wider. Protective already. Good instinct. 300 credits. Cage stays on. Evan hesitated. This was everything he had. 6 months of scraping by, supplies, a future. The girl met his eyes. There was no hope in them, only certainty. Certainty that no one ever helped and no one ever would. That broke something in him. 200, Evan said. She's injured. The merchant laughed. 250 final. Evan transferred the credits. The crate was his. That was when the whistle cut through the market. The crowd parted as 3 masked warriors approached. Tall, powerful, blue-skinned like the girl. The one in front removed her mask, revealing sharp golden eyes filled with cold fury. Sister, the caged girl whispered. The warrior's gaze locked on Evan. You bought our criminal. Her curse is now yours. You don't own her, Evan said. We do, the warrior replied. The cage is her sentence. Remove it and you die. Evan grabbed the crate and ran. He didn't stop until the market was far behind them, the shadows of broken towers swallowing the sound of pursuit. He tore the chains from the girl's wrists, ignoring her warnings. Why were you caged? He asked. For saving a human child, she said. That was my crime. The words hit harder than any weapon. Before Evan could respond, a spear slammed into the sand beside him. Found you, the warrior said. They closed in. Evan stepped in front of the crate. Evan had bought her freedom, but now an entire clan had come to collect the price. Scott started small. He moved the furniture. Liana watched silently as he dragged the couch closer to the bed, rearranged the living space into something tighter, warmer, less empty. Is this preparation? She asked. Yeah, Scott said, wiping sweat from his forehead. For compromise. He laid down ground rules, not commands. Not ultimatums, explanations. Humans explain things. Even when we weren't sure ourselves. Closed doors meant privacy, not rejection. Verbal consent mattered more than instinct. Touch wasn't bad, but it had timing. Liana listened. Actually listened. Her crest shifted colors in slow, thoughtful patterns. You tolerate isolation remarkably well, she said. Your species must possess extreme psychological resilience. Scott laughed humorlessly. Or we're just really good at pretending. They tested boundaries carefully. She learned to knock. He learned to tolerate closeness. Some nights, when the silence grew heavy, Scott surprised himself by not pushing away when Liana sat nearby, close enough that their shoulders brushed. Something else changed too. Liana began asking questions about human wars, human love, human cruelty. Your history suggests self-destruction, she said once. Yet you endure. Yeah, Scott replied. That's kind of our thing. What the galaxy didn't understand, what no report ever captured, was that humans evolved under constant pressure. We adapted to predators, climates, each other. And now, we were adapting again. But adaptation has consequences. Scott noticed the messages first. Encrypted pings from the agency. Queries about Liana's behavioral deviations. Requests for observation reports. He ignored them. That was his second human choice. Scott didn't know it yet, but by protecting Liana's adaptation, he had just flagged himself as a variable the galaxy couldn't ignore. The knock came at 02:14. Not Liana's polite tap. Not human. Metallic official. Scott's blood ran cold. Liana was awake instantly, crest flashing sharp crimson. They have come. Who? Scott whispered, already moving. Compliance officers, she said. I have exceeded acceptable behavioral drift. The door vibrated again. Open, a voice commanded, translated but stripped of warmth. Scott stepped between Liana and the door. No. The word surprised both of them. Human, the voice said. You are interfering with regulated integration. She's not broken, Scott snapped. She's learning. Learning beyond parameters destabilizes civilizations. Scott laughed bitterly. Then your parameters are fragile? The door began unlocking itself. Scott acted. He slammed his palm against the manual override, cutting power to the unit. Old tech, human tech, unnetworked. Silence. Liana stared at him, eyes wide. You risk sanction. Yeah, Scott said quietly. We do that. Footsteps retreated outside. Not gone, delayed. Scott exhaled slowly. He had crossed a line now. Not cultural. Political. He looked at Liana. You okay? She hesitated, then nodded. You chose me. Don't get it twisted, Scott said. I chose us. Outside, the galaxy took notes. Scott didn't realize it yet, but defying compliance for one alien would soon force humanity to defend its right to adapt at all. The apartment didn't feel safe anymore. Scott noticed it in small ways first. The silence outside lasted too long. The air traffic above the city rerouted itself just slightly, like a river flowing around a rock. His terminal pinged with system. Errors that weren't errors at all. Pings without senders. Liana felt it too. They are observing, she said softly. Not enforcement, analysis. Figures, Scott replied. That's when things get dangerous. He wasn't wrong. Humans didn't fear soldiers as much as we feared committees. Committees made decisions slowly, coldly, and once they reached consensus, there was no arguing with the result. The Interstellar Council didn't send another knock. They sent a question. A formal transmission arrived at 06 ear, untranslated on purpose. Liana read it, her crest paling. They request demonstration. Of what? Your adaptability, she said. And my compliance. Scott stared at the text. That's not a test. That's a trap. The Council believed adaptation was a threat. Species that changed too fast destabilized empires. Liana's people had survived by suppressing deviation for millennia. Humans had survived by doing the opposite. Scott transmitted a response before fear could catch up. We don't demonstrate. We explain. Liana's eyes widened. You cannot dictate terms. Watch me. Within hours, an observation platform deployed over the city. Not a warship. Something worse, neutral, untouchable. Watching. Millions of humans like variables in an equation. Scott felt it then, the familiar tightening in his chest. This wasn't about Liana anymore. This was about whether humanity would kneel quietly or redefine the room it stood in. The Council had asked for proof, but Scott had just forced humanity onto the examination table with them. The Council underestimated one thing. Humans don't retreat quietly. The observation platform still hung above the city, its smooth surface reflecting the blue of Earth's skies like an unblinking eye. But now beneath it, streets were filled, not with panic but purpose. Liana stood beside Scott at the apartment window, her crest glowing softly as she sensed the emotional tide below. They're unified, she whispered. Not by command, by choice. Scott nodded. That's what scares them. The Council's final directive arrived moments later. Liana of Etheria is to be reclaimed immediately. Human interference will be neutralized. Neutralized. Scott didn't bother replying. Instead, he activated the broadcast. Every integrated alien household, every interspecies research hub, every neutral world watching Earth as a test case. The feed lit up across the sector. Scott didn't shout. He didn't threaten. "She's not property," he said calmly. "She's not a variable. And she's not leaving." Behind him, Liana stepped into frame. "I choose this," she said clearly. "I choose humanity." That was the moment the Council lost control. Other species began transmitting statements. Refuge requests. Cultural defiance. Quiet admissions of suppressed bonds and forbidden integrations. The platform shifted, power spiking. Containment protocols activated, and humans reacted the only way they knew how. They stood in the way. Civilian vessels launched. Defense grids powered up, not to attack but to block. Scientists rerouted energy fields. Engineers rewrote systems mid-flight. The Council hesitated, because attacking meant admitting fear. And fear spreads faster than rebellion. Liana gripped Scott's hand. "If they fire." "They won't," Scott said. "Because the moment they do, they prove we were right." The platform powered down its weapons. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Council withdrew without issuing judgment. The Council had backed away, but the galaxy was already changing, and there was no undoing it now. Containment came disguised as mercy, a relocation order. Liana would be reassigned, off-world, sanitized, her memories reviewed, her adaptations corrected. Scott read the order 3 times. "No," he said flatly. "This is not optional," the Council replied. That was the moment Scott understood the truth. The galaxy didn't fear human weapons. It feared human choice. Scott uploaded everything: logs, conversations, cultural translations, Liana's testimony, the Council's threats, every moment of forced compliance across 1,000 species. He didn't send it to governments. He sent it to people: scientists, artists, workers, other, integrated aliens living quietly among humans. The response was immediate. Support networks formed overnight. Refuge signals lit up. Humans offered shelter without waiting for approval. Liana watched the chaos unfold, crest glowing bright, unrestrained color. "You have ignited something." "Yeah," Scott said softly. "We tend to do that when cornered." The Council's tone shifted. "No more neutrality. This is escalation." Scott smiled grimly. "You escalated when you tried to erase her. Outside ships repositioned, not attacking, not retreating. Watching. Choosing." Liana met Scott's eyes. "They will not forget this. Neither will we." For the first time, the galaxy wasn't watching humanity as a species. It was watching us as a precedent. The line had been crossed, and the Council now had to decide whether to break humanity or survive us. The platform didn't interfere. It didn't need to. News spread fast when the sky gained a new scar. Humans reacted the way they always did. Half panic, half curiosity, half defiance. Scott watched feeds of street interviews, scientists arguing on live panels, memes already spreading like wildfire. Liana observed it all with silent awe. "Your species does not unify," she said. "Yet you resist collectively." "That's because we don't wait for permission to care," Scott replied. The Council finally spoke directly. A projection filled the room, faceless, genderless, cold. "Human Scott Damon, you have altered a protected integration process." "Yeah," Scott said. "And it worked. Short-term success does not justify long-term instability." Scott leaned forward. "You call it instability. We call it growth." The projection paused, calculating. Liana stepped forward before Scott could stop her. "I was compliant," she said, "and I was incomplete. The human did not corrupt me. He expanded me. That did it." The platform adjusted position. Power surged. "Expansion spreads," the voice said. "Your behavior may propagate." Scott laughed once, sharp. "That's the point." The Council had discovered something they hadn't planned for. Humans weren't contagious because we were aggressive. We were contagious because we were possible. Other species were already watching, already asking questions. The Council issued a warning. Containment would begin. Liana's hand tightened around Scott's wrist. "This will not end peacefully." "No," Scott said. "But it won't end quietly either." Containment had failed before it even began, and the galaxy was about to learn why humans don't stay inside boxes. Victory didn't feel loud. It felt heavy. Weeks passed. The platform vanished. Official silence followed. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just absence. Liana's pregnancy advanced rapidly, her species. Biology accelerated by human influence. The doctors were baffled. The scientists ecstatic. Scott felt something deeper. Responsibility. You realize, he said one night watching Liana sleep, our kid's going to grow up under a microscope. Liana smiled gently. Or under a sky that's wider because of us. The council finally spoke again. Not as rulers. As negotiators. They proposed recognition of human Etherian unions. Temporary protections. Controlled cultural exchange. Scott read the terms once, then deleted them. We don't need permission to exist, he replied publicly. We're not asking for acceptance. We're setting precedent. The response was immediate and quiet. Other worlds followed Earth's lead. Not rebellions, realignments, soft refusals. The council's authority didn't shatter. It eroded. Liana went into labor during a sunrise. Scott held her as energy monitors hummed softly. The bond between them burned bright. Human determination fused with Etherian. Empathy. When their son was born, the room fell silent. He was small, perfect. Lavender-toned skin with human warmth. Bright blue eyes that tracked movement too quickly. A new life. A new answer. Liana wept softly. Scott couldn't. He was too busy realizing the truth. This child wasn't just theirs. He was proof. The galaxy had tried to stop change, but now it had a name. A heartbeat and a future no one could erase. They named him Alexander, defender of humanity. The council attended the naming, not as overseers, but witnesses. For the first time, their representatives stood without authority symbols. Their crests subdued. Alexander's presence changed rooms. Not with power, but possibility. He bonded naturally. Human adaptability amplified Etherian empathy. Scientists stopped calling him an anomaly. They called him the beginning. Years passed. Earth became a crossroads. Not because it conquered, but because it welcomed. Other species studied human resilience, human stubbornness, human refusal to surrender agency. Liana returned to Etheria, not as property, but as an envoy. Scott followed. Together, the ancient houses protested, then listened, then adapted. Alexander grew surrounded by two worlds, and neither dared tell him he didn't belong. One night, Scott stood on a balcony beneath alien stars, Liana beside him. Do you regret it? She asked. Everything that followed that morning? Scott laughed softly. Waking up with an alien housekeeper on my chest? She smiled. I'd do it again, he said. Every time. Because that's what humans do. We don't wait to be invited into the future. We kick the door open, offer a hand, and say, come with us. And the galaxy, whether it likes it or not, follows. Humanity wasn't feared because it was strong, but because once we love something, we refuse to let the universe take it away.